Mr. Speaker, according to the Washington Post, Washington Democrats have diagnosed their messaging as the source of their current political problems. My colleagues and I are here tonight to offer a second opinion. Mr. Speaker, the Washington Democrats certainly do have a problem, but it's not caused by their messaging. It's being caused by their policies, and that's clear for everybody to see. You see, the phrase messaging problem is a phrase that's familiar to us on Capitol Hill. It presumes that the American people would support your agenda. They just haven't heard it yet, or they don't quite understand it. But that is certainly not the problem for these Washington Democrats. It's not their policies, and it's not that their policies are too sophisticated for the rest of us to understand, nor is it that the American people don't know what's good for them. It is exactly the opposite. The American people know what's best for them and their families, and they can see very plainly the results of Washington Democrats' one-party rule, and they do not like it. The plain result of the Washington Democrat agenda can be summed up by what I've been calling back home the 3 I's. You might narrow it down to currently inflation, immigration, and incompetence. We could talk about the crippling inflation, the sky-high illegal immigration, and the unprecedented incompetence of the Democrats in charge and the White House, too. When President Biden and Washington Democrats assumed control of the federal government, inflation, let's talk about inflation. Inflation was at 1.4%. Now here we are, 1 year, trillions of dollars in government spending later, and inflation has reached 8.5%. It's a 41-year high, and it's still climbing. For Americans doing the math at their kitchen table, let's put that in real terms. That means these price increases will cost you 2 paychecks this year and probably 2 more next year. Rather than accepting responsibility, what are they doing? President Biden and Washington Democrats have told us all that it's Russia's fault, and they advise that we buy an electric car. Let's talk about illegal immigration. With regards to that, the policies of President Biden and these Democrats have resulted in record levels of illegal immigration, record levels of illicit drugs flowing into our country, and a humanitarian catastrophe at the southern border. Today, the Biden administration is actually planning to lift the public health restrictions of Title 42 that were really the last remaining tool in the toolbox to control illegal immigration. And believe it or not, get this is happening at the very time that they are suing the federal government, or suing in federal court, to keep Americans mashed up. According to the Biden administration, if you're an illegal immigrant, COVID restrictions are over. But if you're an American citizen, hey, you better buckle up because these COVID restrictions are going to be around for a while. Incompetence, I don't think we need to elaborate too much. Everyone can see this with their own eyes. But it wasn't so long ago that Washington Democrats tried to cast themselves as the party of competence. Remember that in the election cycle? But many congressional Democrats still can't be bothered to even show up here to work. Many haven't voted in person in a long, long time. Some phone into committee hearings from bed, literally. The story at President Biden's agencies isn't much better. Another tax season has come and gone, and yet Biden's Treasury Department is still working through getting last year's tax returns out to the American people. Remember the fatal troop withdrawal, the debacle from Afghanistan. No one at Biden's Defense Department has been fired or held accountable for the chaos that left 13 American soldiers dead. The president himself, he continues to confuse basic policies from the White House podium on a near daily basis. The American people deserve competence in government, but they have received by far, with this administration, the most incompetent government of our lifetimes. Mr. Speaker, again, there's a reason that politicians like to blame their problems on messaging. It implies that if only the American people heard our message, they would support it. But in this case, it's the American people that are hearing very clearly the Democrat message, and they reject it. I thank my colleagues for joining me on the floor this evening, where we'll be talking about the broad array, the panoply of crises created by this administration. And Mr. Speaker, I yield first the gentleman from Wisconsin, Mr. Grothman.